picture Jesus banging his head against the wall? I can. He's been with his friends for a while, and he comes to that fateful moment when he sees that it's time now. Time to begin moving toward his death. To move toward that awful moment when his limitless mercy and pity will move him to give his life to win forgiveness for the guilty and for the unworthy. It's time. So they come to this village, and the people who live there give him the bum's rush, the cold shoulder. And immediately, two of his guys say, shall we call down fire on him? And our first reaction is, where did that come from? What's the matter with you guys? But when you think about it, it makes sense. You can find all kinds of stories in the Old Testament where prophets taught the fear of the Lord by calling down fire on people. My favorite is the time when a bunch of kids were making fun of the prophet Elisha. They were calling him Baldy because of his bald head, and he called down a bear to kill a bunch of them. That'll teach the little beggars some respect. Huh? And so the disciples, in their own minds, were totally in line by doing what had been done many times to defend God's honor. And so, in the midst of so many opinions and assumptions and old history, Jesus has to make clear here and now what it really means to follow him. No, he says, I am not an excuse for you to get revenge or settle old scores. Ever. Nor do I want people to learn how to honor me by fearing what will happen to them if they don't. I don't threaten. All I have to offer them is my love and my cross. Along the same lines, then, of clarifying, come these three very disturbing exchanges. One guy offers to follow Jesus anywhere. And Jesus says, yeah, you know what that means? Anywhere means nowhere. Are you ready to be homeless? To have no settled home, no destination you're heading to, no place where you really feel you belong on this earth? Another wants to follow him, but first has to perform the most sacred duty there is, bury his father. And Jesus says, just forget about all those dead people. What? Another just wants to say goodbye to his family, for crying out loud. And Jesus says, no, unless you make a clean break, you are not worthy of the kingdom. This is really hard. What's going on? Well, let's start here. We all make up little mental pictures of who we are and how the world works, what's normal. We can't help doing it. We just make these pictures automatically, and then most likely we end up trying to jam God into these little pictures. We fit him in there somehow with the way we assume things are. God becomes part of the picture we've made and conforms to the rules of how we think the world works. Here's an example. When I was a kid, we were sort of the odd bunch who officially listened only to classical music. I say officially because when we were out, we listened to the stuff all our friends listened to. But Dad loved classical music and looked down on other forms. He also commanded the radio and kept it tuned to WFMT classical music. And he also bought all the records, and there was not a Perry Como or a Frank Sinatra in there, much less Horrors, Beatles, and Rolling Stones. It was my brother, the arch heretic, who dared to bring Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons in. And he blasted them so loud he stunned the canary, but never when Dad was around. Never. Now, in our house, we just normally assume that God was behind all the rules somehow. So, well, I guess that means God only likes classical music. And as for me, I got in trouble so much I wasn't looking for any more trouble. And I just figured that if God's rules got me in trouble, well, doggone it, they ought to get everybody else in trouble too, just to keep it fair. And so in 4th grade, I wasted a whole recess hunting for a Bible verse to prove that the Beatles were sinful. I didn't find one, but it had to be in there somewhere. This is a simple, if rather ridiculous, example of how the process works. People like us see things a certain way, especially the ones in power, and so God must see things the same way too. And so we have some rules, and we must enforce those rules to defend all that is holy, and even God himself must be forced to respect and conform to those rules. Now, the pity of it is that all this is much more dangerously convincing if the things we're setting up as false gods really are wonderful things. If this man had said to Jesus, "Sure, I'll follow you, but I need to straighten up my sock drawer first," the insult would have been so obvious, right? What is hard is that insisting on beautiful classical music, or putting family first, or burying your dad, or putting your country first, or anything else first, is just as bad. To say, "This is how the world works, Lord, just you got to fit into it." To tell him that I will follow you after I pay my respects to something that is more important than you are, and that is in fact what these people are really doing, that is intolerable to God, and it's a danger to us. We get trapped and snared. We lose God in this mess, and so he must rescue us. Sometimes this becomes most obvious in times of crisis, when our old, settled, inherited rules and views of life just seem to fall apart and don't work anymore. And this can hit in a very personal way. You know, I have cancer, and it's not fair. It's not in my family. I never smoked. I live clean. I'm a good person. What is God doing? Or, I was brought up to believe that you don't mix with a certain kind of person, and now my child, whom I love, wants to marry one. How can I live with this? Sometimes it's not a personal crisis, it's a social crisis that shakes our world and gives Jesus the opportunity to step forward. My hero, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, lived in times when a huge eruption of evil had corrupted all of the comforting rules and assumptions that had guided decent people for centuries. They were confused. How do we know how to live? And in a deeply moving piece, Bonhoeffer points out that reasonable people who want to be fair to everyone will instead be crushed between vicious opposing forces. And fanatics who think they need to charge at their evil enemies will just be played and killed like bulls in a bullfight. And followers of conscience will be so confused by conflicting loyalties that they'll end up settling just for a sedated conscience. instead of doing the right thing, even if it makes them feel bad. And those who follow a path of duty will end up doing their duty. Yeah, they will, even to the devil. And some will merely try to keep their hands clean by turning their backs. So who will stand firm in such a time? Bonhoeffer writes, only the one whose ultimate standard is not his reason, his principles, conscience, freedom, or virtue. Only the one who is prepared to sacrifice all of these when in faith and relationship to God alone, he is called to obedient and responsible action. Follow me. Do this. That is the only one who will stand firm, is the one for whom Jesus alone is profoundly real, for whom Jesus alone is himself the author of all reality, for whom Jesus is the only one who is allowed to put the world back together when nothing seems